What if I told you that there are at least 10 ancient Catholic prophecies that warn of a pope who will gravely harm the church? That is the topic of today's John Henry Westen show, so stay tuned. Let's begin as we always do with the sign of the cross. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. Do you remember that historic speech that Bishop Joseph Strickland made a month ago, where he called out the bishops of the United States, asking them, what will it take? And it was what will it take for them to wake up and start speaking out on the fact that, and I quote, Pope Francis no longer teaches the Catholic faith. That's what Bishop Strickland said. But what he said, specifically when he said that, were these words. And these words were what inspired me to do this show today. Bishop Strickland said, and I quote, "Today we stand on the cusp of all that has been prophesied about the church and the abominations which would come forth in these times, a time when all of hell attacks the church of Jesus Christ, and a time when the fallen angels of hell no longer seek entry into her sacred halls, that's the church's sacred halls, but instead stand inside, peeking out of her windows and unlocking doors to welcome in more diabolical destruction." End quote. Those are powerful words. Those words harken back to Pope Paul VI, when he said after the Second Vatican Council, through some crack or fissure, the smoke of Satan has entered the church. But nonetheless, some people who are facing these times with Pope Francis are very confused. Some people are leaving the faith. In fact, one of the persons that I talked to a few months ago about what's going on with Pope Francis and the heresies said, if it were true that Pope Francis did these things, said these things, that it were all true about him, what's actually going on, he would leave the faith. He would no longer be Catholic. And I was like, whoa, wait. You wouldn't leave the faith. But he said he would. And then I just talked to a person a few days ago who, honest to goodness, he was thinking of entering the church, a Protestant. And I asked him, like I like to, because I like to ask, what's the hardest thing? What's still keeping you? What's you have one big question still, because I want to help. I love that. His question was not about Our Lady or about the sacraments or about communion actually being the body and blood of Christ. I was like, that's what I was hoping for, waiting for to answer, but it wasn't. It was Pope Francis. How do you square Pope Francis being the Pope and teaching all these things when it's not? And I was like, whoa, that is a good question. That is a hard question. So let me show you some of these prophecies that have been made to warn about what's going to happen. Do you remember Christ, before the apostles were to see him go and suffer and die and be brutally killed, arrested and judged and sentenced and killed, and just the most disgusting thing. But before that, what did he do with Peter, James, John? He took them up the mountain and he showed them the transfiguration, himself in glory, so that they would not lose faith. So Christ has warned his church about the possibility of an anti-pope or evil pope coming. In fact, there have been anti-popes in the past, but they're in such ancient past to us that it doesn't even make sense. So then, what about this time? Well, Christ himself warns in Matthew 24, verse 24, "There will arise false Christs and false prophets, and they will show great signs and wonders, insomuch as to deceive, if possible, even the elect." That means even the faithful. In fact, if you look up the Catechism of the Catholic Church, number 675, this is the 92 Catechism, it'll say these words: "Before Christ's second coming, the church must pass through a final trial that will shake the faith of many believers. The persecution that accompanies her pilgrimage on earth will unveil the mystery of iniquity in the form of a religious deception, offering men an apparent solution to their problems at the price of apostasy from the truth. The supreme religious deception is that of Antichrist, a pseudo-messianism by which man glorifies himself in the place of God and of his Messiah come in the flesh. So, as you can see, the Church already, Christ officially, and the Catechism warn of the Church not ascending into glory and ending up, holy pope after holy pope after holy pope, and then in glory she tried. No, actually, the Church is betrayed. In fact, Pope Benedict talked about that betrayal. He talked about the wolves inside the Church. In fact, he said the persecutions of the Church are worst from within. Several saints and blesseds and approved Marian apparitions and popes have made statements or prophecies that suggest the possibility of a pope betraying Christ in some way, or an anti-pope or something like that. So here is my list of the 10 most relevant prophecies pointing to a future pope or anti-pope who will deceive even the elect. But right before we get there, I have to ask you, please support LifeSite News. We are in the middle of our Christmas fundraising drive, the most important one of the year. And the only way we can keep going, providing you with all the news and all the shows and the information that you value, is your financial support. It's the only thing that keeps us going. If you've not already done so this Christmas campaign, please go to give.lifesitenews.com and make the most generous gift you can. Please do that today. Thank you for doing that. It's true, without your support, this show and all our shows, all our services would not be possible. So, number 1 on our list is well known to many and is the approved apparition of Our Lady of La Salette from 1846. In that approved apparition, Our Lady of La Salette said, and I quote for you, "Rome will lose the faith and become the seat of Antichrist." End quote. Yeah, sounds like a mouthful. Let's go on to number 2. Saint Nicholas of Flüe, known all over the German-speaking world as Bruder Klaus, lived from 1417 to 1487. Saint Nicholas, or Bruder Klaus, was a Swiss mystic. He prophesied about a time of great crisis in the Church, and he said these words, and I quote, "The Church will be punished because the majority of her members, high and low, will become so perverted." He said, "The Church will sink deeper and deeper until she will at last seem to be extinguished, and the succession of Peter and the apostles will have apparently failed." Isn't that interesting? He continues, "But after this, she will be victoriously exalted in the sight of all doubters." And isn't that beautiful? That is true in all the prophecies. It's not doom and gloom. Yes, they warn of calamity and this infidelity and apostasy, which means a great apostasy, means leaving of the faith. But they all also promise a glorious restoration. So let's go on with our list. Number 3, Blessed Tomasio de Foligno, also from the 14th century. Blessed Tomasio wrote, and I quote, he was writing in a prophecy that he called the Worthy Shepherd prophecy. Has been dubbed the word Worthy Shepherd prophecy. He was writing about a prophecy of a future pontiff who would restore the Church after a period of schism and turmoil. So he too is talking about this glorious time after a time of great apostasy. He said, and I quote, "The bark of Peter is in danger and there's no one to lend it help." That's speaking of the bad times, of course. He said, "During those times, the schismatics shall fall into the scorn of the Italian faithful." He says, "The resplendent mantle of legitimate power shall emerge from the shadows where it was being kept by the schism, and beyond harm from the one who is blocking the door of salvation, for his deceitful schism shall have come to an end. The mass, he says, the mass of the faithful shall attach itself to the worthy shepherd, that's the new pope, who shall extricate each one from error and restore to the church its beauty. He shall renew it, end quote. So this is, as always, a hopeful prophecy. This is what happens in the church. It's not about doom and gloom. It's about hope. And before I continue, let me remind you, this is our Christmas fundraising time. Please do give generously. For U.S. residents only, you'll see the ticker at the bottom. You can text LifeSite to that number you see there, and you'll be able to make your donation that way. Otherwise, just go to give.lifesitenews.com and make your most generous gift today. Number 4 on our list is a famous prophecy attributed to St. Francis of Assisi, of course, who lived from 1181 to 1226. And this prophecy, I looked it up. You can find it. It's in a book called The Works of the Seraphic Father St. Francis of Assisi, compiled by the members of the Franciscan order. And in the prophecy, it says this, and I quote, "There will be an uncanonically elected pope who will cause a great schism." And there's that schism word again. So he will cause a great schism, and there will be diverse thoughts preached, which will cause many, even those in different orders, to doubt, even agree with those errors, end quote. So then there's another famous one. And the famous one sort of alludes to corruption in the hierarchy, doesn't quite name a pope per se. It's the famous one of Our Lady of Akita, proved Marian apparition. Our Lady of Akita said, and I quote, "The work of the devil will infiltrate even into the church in such a way that one will see cardinals opposing cardinals, bishops against bishops," end quote. And there again is that theme of the infiltration of Satan into the church. Number 6 on our list of 10 prophecies is the big one. It's the Fatima prophecy. Now, you might wonder, what? The Fatima prophecy? What did that say about the church or the Pope? Well, lots. Let's dig in a little bit. So, of course, this was given to the 3 children in 1917, and then after the 2 died, Jacinta and Francesco died, the rest was given to Lucia as she lived out her years in the convent. While the full content of the 3rd secret of Fatima is the subject of much dispute, we're going to talk about that. Because even in what was revealed, and I say what was revealed for a couple of reasons. First of all, with the visions at Fatima, you have vision and explanation. Vision and explanation. With the 3rd secret, which was supposed to be revealed in 1960, never got revealed. You finally got it in the year 2000, and then something strange happened because you had a vision without an interpretation. And an official interpretation was given by the Vatican, but it was kind of weird. And nobody who believed and studied Fatima forever and ever believes that interpretation. And also, most of the experts believed that there's a part missing. So let's, though, read some of that 3rd secret prophecy of what was, in fact, revealed. Here are the words that were given by the Vatican in the year 2000, and I quote, "And we saw in an immense light that is God, something similar to how people appear in a mirror when they pass in front of it, a bishop dressed in white." Now, as an aside note, it's interesting because Pope Francis referred to himself as the bishop dressed in white. So they say, the vision says, they saw a bishop dressed in white. Then they go on to say, "We had the impression that it was the Holy Father. Other bishops, priests, men and women religious going up a steep mountain, at the top of which there was a big cross of rough-hewn trunks as of a cork tree with the bark. Before reaching there, And now it says the Holy Father. So now it's not a lot of people speculated, it's not the bishop dressed in white. Now it's the Pope that they're talking about. The Holy Father passed through a big city, half in ruins and half trembling with halting step, afflicted with pain and sorrow. He prayed for the souls of the corpses he met on his way. Remember that wording, because it'll apply in a later prophecy. Having reached the top of the mountain, on his knees at the foot of the big cross, he was killed by a group of soldiers. And there's more to it. You can please go read for yourself the full secret, third secret as revealed by the Vatican in the year 2000. But you had some of these sayings from Sister Lucy after the fact. So this is one Sister Lucy said after the fact. She said, and I quote, "The devil has succeeded in infiltrating evil under the guise of good, and the blind are beginning to lead others. This is a danger that is most serious for the church." One of the children, Jacinta Marto, the other seer, expressed concern about priests and leaders in the church and the Pope. She said, "Poor Holy Father, we must pray much for him." And then in a 1957 interview with Father Agustin Fuentes, Sister Lucy stated this, and I quote, "The devil is in the mood for engaging in a decisive battle against the Blessed Virgin. He will succeed in leaving the souls of the faithful abandoned by their leaders," end quote. So very much to do with Our Lady of Fatima. But what about the Pope? Is there nothing about the Pope in the message of Our Lady of Fatima? And then we come to the crux of why most of the Vatican, or most of the Fatima experts, will say why the message was not revealed in 1960, and why even in 2000, when they revealed the vision, they wouldn't reveal the explanation. Here, this is a quote from Bishop and Cardinal, actually, Luigi Sciappi, who lived from 1914 to 1996. He was the theologian of the papal household, and he was also the advisor to 5 popes. And this is a quote from him. "In the third secret," he said, this is Cardinal Sciappi, "in the third secret," he said, "it is foretold, among other things, that the great apostasy in the church will begin at the top." Go look it up. So then there's Father Ingo Dollinger. He was a very close friend of Pope Benedict XVI. Father Dollinger claimed that the third secret spoke of apostasy beginning at the highest levels of the church as well. In fact, he spoke to Pope Benedict after the secret was so-called revealed in 2000, because he knew this from Benedict himself. So he went to him after the secret was released and said, "Hey, what was that?" And Pope Benedict, after some pressure from him, finally just walked away or whatever. It's very interesting, though. Go to lifesitenews.com and read the account by Dr. Micah Hickson and about Father Ingo Dollinger. Very, very interesting stuff. But it actually gets more interesting still. Get this. Right before I do, let me remind you one more time. Please, please, go to lifesitenews.com, go to the top right-hand side of the page, hit the donate button and support us. Because without you, we can't do this stuff. And this is our fundraiser. We don't do many of them. We do quarterly fundraisers. That's all. We don't hound you every day. And basically, we're begging you to support us so that we can keep going. Number 7 is the beloved Saint Padre Pio. Now, this is incredible because it relates directly to Fatima, and boy, oh boy, is it significant. You want the full story on this, go to LifeSite News, look up Dr. Micah Hickson, and she did this. She did it first, actually, over at 1 Peter 5. So she reveals an interview with a very famous Roman exorcist. In fact, probably the most famous Roman exorcist of all time. His name is Father Gabriel Amorth. It was an interview conducted by Jose Maria Zavala, a journalist. And Father Amorth, the most famous exorcist who ever lived, he personally knew Padre Pio. In fact, he worked with Padre Pio for 26 years. And Father Amorth claims to have learned the contents of the third secret of Fatima from Padre Pio. So I'm going to read you part of this interview from Zavala's book, and I'm just going to read excerpts from it so you get this, but it's so stunning. It really is the crux of what you might take away from this. Listen, this is Zavala, the interviewer. Forgive me for insisting on the third secret of Fatima. Did the Padre Pio relate it, then, to the loss of faith within the church? Father Amorth, the exorcist, furrows his brow and sticks out his chin, and he seems very affected by what was said. Father Amorth replies, Indeed. One day, Padre Pio said to me very sorrowfully, You know, Gabriele, that's his first name, it is Satan who has been introduced into the bosom of the church and within a very short time will come to rule a false church. End quote. Then the interviewer, Zavala, he freaks out. He says, Oh my God, some kind of antichrist. When did he prophesy this to you? Father Amorth, the exorcist, responds, It must have been about 1960, since I was already a priest then. The interviewer interrupts again. Why, that was John the 23rd had such a panic about publishing the third secret of Fatima so that the people wouldn't think that he was the anti-pope or whatever it was. And then Father Amorth gives a slight but knowing smile. And then he continues. The interviewer says, Did Padre Pio say anything else to you about the future catastrophes? Earthquakes, floods, wars, epidemics, hunger? Did he allude to the same plagues prophesied in the Holy Scriptures? Father Amorth responds this way. He says, Nothing of that sort mattered to him, however terrifying they proved to be, except for the great apostasy within the church. This was the issue that really tormented him and for which he prayed and offered a great part of his suffering, crucified out of love. The interviewer says, The third secret of Fatima? Father Amorth responds, Exactly. The interviewer again, Is there any way to avoid something so terrible, Father Gabriele? And Father Amorth responds, There is hope, but it is useless if it is not accompanied by works. Let us begin by consecrating Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Let us recite the Holy Rosary. Let us do prayer and penance. And see again, there's hope. There's hope, but it needs prayer and penance. It needs the fulfillment of the Fatima request for the consecration of Russia, and on our part, the part of the laity, the 5 First Saturday devotions. If you don't know about that, go to lifesitenews.com and look it up. Number 8 on our list is Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich, a mystic who lived in the 1700s to the 1800s, 1774 to 1824. She described visions of a false church and a dark church that would rise alongside the true church. She spoke of confusion and betrayal within the hierarchy of the church, including when and here it is again, a bishop dressed in white would be compromised. So, I'm reading from the Life and Revelations of Anne Catherine Emmerich, a collection of her visions compiled and edited by Clemens Brentano. It's an awesome book, but there's about 3,000 pages, I warn you. It's awesome, though, nonetheless. So in April 12th of 1820, this is recorded by Clemens from St. Anne Catherine Emmerich, or Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich, soon to be saint, for sure. If you read about her, you'll know right away. She said, and I quote, I saw a strange church being built against every rule. In that church, nothing came from above. There was only division and chaos. It is likely a church of human creation following the latest fashion. I saw again the mysterious figure. He is not the true pope. He is wearing a large hat and a long white cloak. End quote. Of this false church, she said, and I quote, I saw it increase in size. Heretics of every kind came into the city. That's probably the city of Rome. The local clergy grew lukewarm, and I saw a great darkness. Then the vision seemed to extend on every side. Whole Catholic communities were oppressed, harassed, confined, and deprived of their freedom. I saw many churches closed down, great miseries everywhere, wars and bloodshed." End quote. She actually went on, she said, and I quote again, "Once more, I saw the Church of Peter was undermined by a plan evolved by the secret sect." Read Freemasons. She continues, "While storms were damaging it. But I also saw that help was coming when distress had reached its peak. I saw again the Blessed Virgin ascend on the church and spread her mantle. I saw a pope who was at once gentle and very firm. I saw a great renewal, and the church rose high in the sky." So you see again with Anne Catherine Emmerich and her visions, her stark warnings, there is a time of a distress and terrible time, a time of travail inside the church, but the restoration will come. But she makes mention of so many things about the Pope, the bishop dressed in white, about this, she talked about the baleful relationship between the two popes. That's why so many people thought, gee, I wonder if she saw what we saw with Benedict and Francis at the same time. Well, she has a little bit more on that. I'll quote again. "I see the Holy Father in great anguish. He lives in a palace other than before, and he admits only a limited number of friends near him. I fear that the Holy Father will suffer many more trials before he dies. I see that the false church of darkness is making progress, and I see the dreadful influence it has on the people. The Holy Father and the Church are verily in so great a distress that one must implore God day and night." So, super interesting. Remember, Pope Benedict, when he left, he went to another palace. He went on the Vatican grounds still, and he only admitted a limited number of friends. Very, very interesting. Let's go on. Number 9 on our list of the top 10 prophecies that speak to this calamity in the church with a pope or maybe anti-pope. Number 9, St. Pius X. Yeah, Pope himself, 1835 to 1914. Pope Pius X had a vision where he saw one of his successors fleeing Rome over the bodies of his brethren and eventually being martyred. Doesn't that sound like exactly like the message of Fatima, by the way? It certainly does. And remember, Pope Pius X dies in 1914 before the messages of Fatima. So this is very interesting. He says the same things. So in 1909, Pope Pius X had a vision. It was during an audience with members of the Franciscan order. Pope Pius X, he appeared to enter like a trance-like state. And when he regained his composure, he said, and I quote, "What I have seen is terrifying. Will it be myself? Will it be a successor? What is certain is that the Pope will quit Rome, and in leaving the Vatican, he will have to pass over the dead bodies of his priests." End quote. Wow, that does sound like the Fatima vision. 1914 vision, this is a second one that he had. This was shortly before his death. Pope Pius X had a vision which said, and saying, he said, and I quote, "I have seen one of my successors of the same name who is fleeing over the bodies of his brethren. He will take refuge in some hiding place, but after a brief respite, he will die a cruel death." End quote. So that's interesting. If you're really speculative, you can talk about how his name actually was Joseph. That is, Pope Pius X's first name was Joseph. Joseph is also the first name of Pope Benedict, Joseph Ratzinger. And so there'd been some speculation if that was the Pope. But did Ratzinger actually flee? Well, yeah, sort of, he did. You could say he quit Rome, but did he actually die a cruel death? There is actually speculation that he died. If you look it up, I'm not going to go into it here, but if you look it up, there was a vision that said Pope Benedict was indeed murdered. There's no corroboration for that from the Vatican, of course, but there's that speculation anyway. And given what's going on in the Vatican today, no one knows what to believe. And finally, number 10. Number 10 on our list of the prophecies is from none other than Saint Faustina Kowalska, the very modern saint, made sainthood by Pope John Paul II. She lived from 1905 to 1938. She, in her writings, warned of persecution and corruption in the church, and I'll quote it for you. She said, "I saw the church persecuted by terrible trials. And get this," she says, "when I prayed for Poland, I heard the words, 'I bear a special love for Poland, and if she will be obedient to my will, I will exalt her in might and holiness. From her will come forth the spark that will prepare the world for my final coming.'" Now, I think most Polish people and most Catholics of my age will say, I know who that was. It was John Paul II. But that, again, is left to your interpretation. But there's something else fascinating about the writings of St. Faustina Kowalska as they apply particularly to Pope Francis. And I want you to look this up because this is so stunning and so little known. If you look up Faustina's diary, the entry date of December 17th, 1936, you'll find a very interesting message. Now, think about this. What's that date, December 17th, 1936? I'll tell you what date it is. It's the day of the birth of Jorge Maria Bergoglio, the birthday of Pope Francis. And guess what Sister Faustina said? I'll quote, "I have offered this day 4 priests. I have suffered more today than ever before, both interiorly and exteriorly. I did not know it was possible to suffer so much in one day. I tried to make a holy hour, in the course of which my spirit had a taste of the bitterness of the Garden of Gethsemane. I am fighting alone, supported by his arm," his with a capital H, meaning Jesus' arm, "against all the difficulties that face me like unassailable walls. But I trust in the power of his name, and I fear nothing." That's from the diary of St. Faustina. Remember, my friends, it's not doom and gloom. It is the warning of our Lord to his church about the great apostasy that's coming, very much like the Transfiguration, warning Peter, James, and John that his own crushing defeat and martyrdom was coming. And he does these things, the church warns us of these things, so we won't do what the friend I talked to some 3 or 4 or 5 weeks ago said. He would leave the church. No, we're warned by our Lord himself in Matthew 24, also by St. Paul. Let me read that to you. In 2 Thessalonians 2, 3-4, he says, "Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come," that means the final day, "shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that the man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he, as God, sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God." And he's speaking there, of course, of Antichrist. But interestingly, he says Antichrist sits in the temple of God, which, no, Paul was not a Jew at the time. He's a Christian. And so what is he saying is the temple of God? Was he saying that about the church? What's he saying that about? Confusing things for sure. But with all the confusion that Francis of Rome has brought to the whole church right now, that's no reason at all to leave the one true, holy, Catholic, and Apostolic Church. For LifeSite News, this is John Henry Westen. May God bless you.